My parents left for Paris on a Tuesday morning in July. My mother kissed me on the forehead, handed me a $20 bill folded in half, and said, "Mrs. Garner, next door knows you're here. Don't be a bother to her." My father was already loading the luggage into the taxi. He didn't come back inside. The front door clicked shut at 6:14 a.m. I know the exact time because I watched the clock on the microwave while I stood in the kitchen holding a $20 bill and a house key, 11 years old, 31 days stretching out in front of me like a road with nothing on either side. I ate cereal for breakfast. Then I sat on the porch and counted the money. $20. 1 month. I did not cry. I had learned early that crying in that house accomplished nothing. What I didn't know, standing there on that porch in the July heat, was that 31 days later, when my parents landed back at Dulles Airport tanned and carrying wine from a vineyard in Bordeaux, there would be a police report with our address on it. A neighbor who had become something closer to family than either of my parents had ever managed, a boy in my class who had made a decision that would echo for 20 years, and a folder that my father's own business partner had been keeping in, a locked drawer, since the year I was born. The $20 lasted 4 days. Before I take you all the way back, please take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if this story genuinely stays with you. Drop your city and the time in the comments below. I always love knowing where you're watching from. My name is Jess Whitmore. I'm 31 years old. I'm a child welfare case manager in Richmond, Virginia, which, as I'll explain, is either the most obvious career I could have chosen or the most deliberate. This is the story of the summer my parents left me alone at 11 years old, what happened while they were gone, and what I found out 20 years later about why they were never really the people I thought they were. Let me take you back to Clover Hill, Virginia, population 68,000, the kind of suburb that looks like a neighborhood but functions like a waiting room. Everyone passing through on the way to something else, nobody quite putting down roots. Our house on Fairfield Lane was a 3-bedroom split level with a yard my father paid a service to maintain because he said manual labor was for people who hadn't planned ahead. My father, Richard Whitmore, was a commercial real estate developer. He wore linen shirts on weekends. He had opinions about wine and airport terminals and the decline of American craftsmanship, and shared all of them freely at dinner. My mother, Diane, organized charity galas for causes she'd chosen based on which committees had the best connections. She smelled like Chanel No. 5 and was always just leaving or just arriving somewhere that wasn't home. I was their only child. I use the word there loosely. What I mean is, I was the child who lived in their house, ate their food when there was food to eat, attended the schools they enrolled me in, and served, on occasion, as a prop in the image they maintained of a complete and successful family. I was also, in practical terms, frequently an afterthought. By age 9, I knew how to run the washing machine, restock the pantry using cash my mother left on the counter, heat up the dinner she'd left in a container in the fridge, and get myself to school when my father's early meetings and my mother's late evenings overlapped in ways that left the morning uncovered. I was not, to be precise, neglected in the way you might imagine. I was not hungry most of the time. I was not physically unsafe in any obvious way. I was neglected in the particular way available only to children of wealthy, image-conscious parents. I was provided for and unseen. There is a specific loneliness in that combination that I have spent a large portion of my adult life learning to name. The Europe trip was not a surprise. My parents had been talking about it since April. Richard had a business contact in London, a property development conference in Amsterdam, and a personal desire to spend 2 weeks in France that had apparently been building for a decade. My mother had wanted to see the Louvre since she'd read a novel about it in 1998. The trip was planned the way my parents planned everything, around what they wanted with logistics adjusted until the obstacles disappeared. I was 11. I was an obstacle. They adjusted. The official plan, as described to the neighbors, and, I believe, to themselves. Mrs. Garner from next door would check in on me. I had a phone. I knew the rules. I was very mature for my age, a phrase my parents had been using since I was 7, which I understood even then to mean, she requires less than we'd like to give. The actual plan, $20, a landline with a list of numbers taped to the wall that included Mrs. Garner, the family doctor, and my father's assistant Karen, a refrigerator with enough food for approximately 5 days, and a cable subscription. Mrs. Garner was 71, with a bad hip and a better heart than anyone else on that street. She had a cat named Persimmon and a garden that she tended with a devotion I found at 11 slightly excessive, and find now, at 31, completely correct. She brought me a casserole the first evening. She sat at our kitchen table while I ate it and asked me what I was reading. I told her, a library book about the history of bridges. She did not find this unusual. She was the kind of person who accepted children as they were rather than as she'd imagined them. The $20 was gone by Saturday. For days. I was not irresponsible. Milk, bread, a box of pasta, a jar of pasta sauce. I made it last as long as I could. By Sunday, I was eating the emergency can of soup from the back of the pantry and calculating what else was in the house that could be turned into a meal. I was 11 years old doing the math of scarcity that no child should know how to do. I did not call my parents. The number they'd left was for the hotel in London, with a note in my mother's handwriting. Only for emergencies. I sat with the phone in my hand more than once that first week and tried to decide whether running out of food counted as an emergency in our household's definition of the word. I decided it probably did not. I knocked on Mrs. Garner's door on Monday morning. I told her I had run out of groceries. I said it the way I'd practiced, flat, factual, no drama, the same way I'd learned to report everything in that house. She looked at me for a long moment. Then she opened her door wider and said, "Come have breakfast." I ate scrambled eggs at her kitchen table, with Persimmon watching me from the counter. Mrs. Garner sat across from me and asked careful questions, not about my parents, not about the money, just about me. What did I like to do? Did I have friends nearby? Had I been to the pool this summer? She was assessing, I understand now, doing the quiet math that adults who pay attention do when a child shows up at their door at 8 a.m. on a Monday saying they've run out of food. After breakfast, she handed me $40 and said, "Go to the Harris Teeter on Broad Street. Get what you need. Come back and tell me what you bought." She was not condescending about it. She just needed to know I could manage it. I managed it. That became the pattern of the first 2 weeks. Mrs. Garner fed me breakfast 3 or 4 mornings a week. I spent the rest of the time at the library, at the neighborhood pool with a pass I'd found in the junk drawer, or reading in my room. I called my mother once, on a Wednesday, 2 weeks in. The phone rang 7 times. My mother answered sounding slightly breathless, like she'd just come from somewhere wonderful. "Jess, honey, is everything okay?" "Yes," I said. "I just wanted to say hi. We're just heading to dinner. Can I call you tomorrow?" "Sure," I said. She did not call the next day. She called 4 days later for 6 minutes and spent 3 of them telling me about a market in Provence. The party was not my idea. His name was Tyler Brent. He was 12, lived 4 houses down, and had the particular confidence of a boy who had never been told no by anyone who meant it. He'd seen me coming and going all summer, knew my parents were away, and appeared on my doorstep on a Friday afternoon in week 3 with an offer that, to an 11-year-old who had been alone for 21 days, sounded less like a bad idea, and more like the presence of other human beings. "You should have people over," he said. "Your house is huge, and your parents aren't here." "I don't think that's a good idea," I said. It'll just be a few people. Just kids from the neighborhood. We'll clean up. I want to be clear. I knew it was a bad idea. I was not naive. I was 11, not 5. But I had been alone in that house for 21 days with a library book and a cat I was borrowing from the neighbor, and the particular ache that comes from being 11 years old and having nobody ask you how you are. When Tyler said people, and your house, what I heard, without knowing that's what I was hearing, was, you don't have to be by yourself tonight. I said yes. There were 14 kids at 6 p.m. By 9 p.m., there were 41. I know the number because it was in the police report. Ages ranged from 11 to 17. Someone had brought a Bluetooth speaker. Someone had brought things from their parents' liquor cabinet. The kitchen had cups on every surface. The backyard had people I had never seen before. I stood in the middle of my living room at 9:15 p.m., looking at 41 people in my parents' house and felt, with complete clarity, the difference between wanting company and having lost control of my own front door. I found Tyler in the kitchen. You need to tell everyone to leave, I said. He shrugged. It's just getting started. Tyler, tell them to go. He looked at me the way boys look at you when they've decided your discomfort is not their problem. Relax, he said. Your parents aren't even here. That was when the knock came. Not the doorbell. A knock. Specific. Authoritative. 2 officers from the Chesterfield County Police Department were standing on my porch. A neighbor 3 doors down had called. Standard noise complaint, disturbance. They were professional and not unkind. They asked who was in charge. I said, because it was true. It's my house. My name is Jess Whitmore. How old are you, Jess? 11. A pause. The 2 officers looked at each other. And where are your parents? I told them. Europe. 3-week trip. They'd left 10 days ago and would be back in 11 days. Another pause. Longer. The party was cleared in 12 minutes. 41 kids, some of whom I'd never seen before, dispersed into the July night. Tyler Brent left without looking at me. I stood in my living room, cups on the coffee table, the speaker still on the kitchen counter, a chip bag on the floor, and answered questions from 2 police officers who were trying very hard not to show on their faces what they were thinking. One officer, his name badge said Reyes, asked if I was okay, if I had what I needed, if there was an adult who could come stay with me. I thought about Mrs. Garner. Next door, I said, Mrs. Garner. Officer Reyes knocked on her door himself. She came over in her bathrobe and slippers, Persimmon watching from the window. She took one look at the state of the living room, one look at me, and said to the officers, I'll take it from here. She stayed until midnight, helping me clean up. She didn't lecture me. She asked once while we were collecting cups, whose idea was the party? Tyler's, I said, but I said yes. She nodded. Why? I was quiet for a moment. Then I said, I was tired of being by myself. She stopped what she was doing, looked at me. Something moved across her face, the thing adults' faces do when they're deciding something. Jess, she said carefully, how much food do you have in the house right now? I told her. She set down the bag she was holding. How much did your parents leave you? $20. She was quiet for a long time after that. When she spoke again, her voice was the specific, controlled calm of someone keeping something in check. You're going to sleep in my guest room for the rest of the time they're gone, she said. It was not a question. Bring what you need. Persimmon will adjust. I slept in Mrs. Garner's guest room for the next 11 nights. The police filed a report. Standard documentation. Minor home alone. Party situation. No charges. Welfare check conducted. Neighbor assumed temporary supervision. It went into a county database. It sat there the way paperwork sits, quiet, patient, waiting to matter. My parents came home on a Thursday. Richard carried 2 bottles of Bordeaux and a rolling suitcase. Diane had a scarf from a shop near the Polaire Oil and a new haircut. They walked in the front door tan and loose-shouldered with the ease of people who had genuinely let everything go. My father looked around the living room. Everything was in order. Mrs. Garner and I had cleaned it spotless. Good, he said. Like I had passed a test he hadn't bothered to administer. My mother gave me a long hug that smelled like French airport and said, "We missed you so much. Was everything okay?" "There was a party," I said. "The police came." She went very still. Then she looked at my father. The conversation that followed was not about my welfare. It was not about the $20 or the food or the 11 days in Mrs. Garner's guest room. It was about the police report. It was about the neighbors. It was about what people would think if word got around that there had been a police call at the Whitmore house on Fairfield Lane. My father grounded me for 2 weeks. For the party. Not for the fact of my being 11 years old and alone for a month. For the party. Mrs. Garner knocked on our door the following Saturday. I watched from the top of the stairs. Out of sight. She stood on our porch in her good cardigan, the gray one she wore for church, and she said to my father, in a voice like a door closing, "Your daughter ate cereal for 4 days before she came to me. She had $20 for a month. She's 11 years old." She paused. "I think you know what you did. I think you should think about whether a police report is really what you're concerned about." My father said, "I appreciate you looking after her, Eleanor. I really do." Mrs. Garner looked at him for a long moment. She looked after herself. She said, "That's the problem." She walked back to her house. My father closed the door. He stood in the hallway for a moment with his hand still on the knob. Then he went to pour himself a glass of the Bordeaux. "One thing." I heard her turning pages. The Delaware LLC. It was dissolved in 2019. When an LLC dissolves, its assets distribute to the members. Your father was the sole member. She paused. "Which means those funds, the ones originally transferred from your custodial account, were distributed to him personally when the LLC wound down." Another pause. "Which means we can trace the money. It didn't disappear. It transferred. Twice. It took 14 months. I want to be honest about that, not a dramatic courtroom confrontation, not a single scene where everything exploded. 14 months of filings, responses, depositions, settlement negotiations, and the particular grinding patience of civil litigation. My father hired an attorney who argued that the UTMA transfer had been a bookkeeping error, that the funds had been substantially used for Jess's benefit, in the form of housing, food, and education, a claim that required him to define a $20 bill and a month of unsupervised habitation as educational investment, which his attorney attempted with a straight face. Patricia was better. The deposition was a Tuesday in December. My father sat across a conference table in a charcoal suit, looking, I thought, very much like a man who had spent a lifetime being the most important person in every room and was finding this room uncooperative. Patricia asked him, among other questions, had he been aware of the balance in the custodial UTMA account at the time of the transfer in 2001? He said he had not been closely monitoring it. Patricia showed him Harold Garner's documentation. He said, "Eleanor Garner's deceased husband had no standing to document my financial records." Patricia said, "He wasn't documenting your financial records, Mr. Whitmore. He was documenting your daughter's." My father looked at the folder for a long moment. Then he looked at me, for the first time since we'd sat down. Looked at me the way he had looked at me, my entire life, with the particular expression of a man encountering a variable he hadn't planned for. I looked back. I didn't look away. The settlement was reached 4 months later. I am not able to share the specific number. What I can tell you is this. It was enough to pay off my student loans, which totaled $41,200. It was enough to purchase a 2-bedroom townhouse in Richmond's Church Hill neighborhood, which I did in March, in cash, at age 30. It was enough to establish a small foundation. Eleanor Garner was right that I should name it for someone, called the Persimmon Fund, which provides emergency financial support to children in foster care aging out of the system in the Richmond metro area. The Persimmon Fund has served 34 children in its first year of operation. My father signed the settlement agreement on a Wednesday. His attorney called Patricia. Patricia called me. I was sitting in my car in the parking lot of the CPS office after a 12-hour shift. I listened to the terms. I said, okay. I sat for another 10 minutes after I hung up, just sitting, hands on the steering wheel, not going anywhere. Then I called Mrs. Garner. She picked up on the second ring. She always does. It's done, I said. A pause. Then her voice, steady and warm and exactly as it had always been. Harold always said the right documents in the right hands change everything. He was right, I said. He usually was, she said. Come for tea on Sunday. I'll be there, I said. My parents have not contacted me directly since the settlement. My mother sent a card at Christmas. A store-bought one, the kind with a generic sentiment, and a signature beneath it, no note. My father has not written. I do not expect him to. I have come to understand that some people are incapable of the specific kind of accounting that requires them to look at what they took and call it by its name. My father can trace a $1 million real estate transaction through 4 entities across 2 states. He cannot trace what a $20 bill on a kitchen counter meant to an 11-year-old standing in an empty house. That is not my failure to correct. Tyler Brent. If you're wondering, I found him on LinkedIn 3 years ago. He's a project manager in Charlotte, married, 2 kids. He's never reached out. I don't need him to. Officer Reyes retired from Chesterfield County PD in 2021. I know this because I called the department's non-emergency line 2 years ago and asked. I wanted to know who he was. The desk officer told me he'd retired after 24 years, was doing fine. I said, can you pass a message? She said she'd try. I left one. A woman named Jess Whitmore wanted to say thank you for a welfare check in 2004. You asked how old she was. It mattered. I don't know if he got it. I hope he did. Let me tell you about my townhouse in Church Hill. It has 2 bedrooms and a kitchen with more counter space than I know what to do with. The back window looks out over a small garden that I am learning slowly how to tend with the same devotion I once found excessive and now find completely correct. I have a plant on every windowsill and a bookshelf in every room and a dining table I bought at an estate sale for $55 that fits exactly 4 people comfortably. I have had exactly 4 people at it for dinner. Mrs. Garner was one of them. She brought Clementine in a carrier, and the cat judged all of us equally from the kitchen chair. On the wall above my desk, I have 2 things. Harold Garner's note from the margin of the last page of his folder. This belongs to the child. And a photograph taken in Mrs. Garner's kitchen, Sunday afternoon, the October I turned 30, me and Eleanor Garner at her kitchen table, tea in front of both of us, Clementine between us, both of us laughing at something neither of us can remember. I was looking for a photograph of someone who had always seen me. That one was easy to find. I want to say something to you before I go, not as a case manager, not as someone who received a settlement, as the girl who stood on a porch in July holding a folded $20 bill and counted it like it would somehow be enough. Being provided for and being loved are not the same thing. A roof and a refrigerator and a school enrollment do not constitute care. Care is the thing that costs nothing financially and everything personally. It is the person who asks what you're reading, who notices you've run out of groceries, who shows up in a bathrobe at midnight to help you clean up a mess you made because you were tired of being alone. My parents had money. Eleanor Garner had attention. I know which one built me. If you are a child right now who is alone and weighs your house and your clothes and your school don't show, what is happening to you is not normal, and it is not your fault, and somewhere near you there is likely an Eleanor Garner who has already noticed. Let her in. If you are an adult who was that child, who learned too early how to make a box of pasta last, and how to fill a silence nobody else noticed, I want you to hear this. The self-sufficiency they called maturity was not a gift they gave you. It was a gap they left. You filled it yourself. That is yours. The gap was theirs. And if someone left a folder for you in a locked drawer, if there is a Harold Garner somewhere in your story, a person who documented the truth and held it until you were ready, go find it. The right documents in the right hands change everything. My name is Jess Whitmore. I'm 31 years old. I have a townhouse in Churchill and a garden I'm learning to tend and a foundation named for a cat. I was left alone at 11 with a $20 bill. I turned out to be worth considerably more than that. Thank you for staying all the way to the end. If this story touched something you've been carrying, if you were the child who took care of themselves so quietly that nobody ever thought to ask if you were okay, leave it in the comments. I read every one. If this story found someone who needed it, please share it. You might be someone's Eleanor Garner today. Hit like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.